Yifei and Hide, the first question about is, could you walk us through about your journey of entering the UN system, especially the JPO program, and how you prepare for your JPO assignment before being assigned to the JPOs? So, can I ask this question to Hide first, for example?
Yes, thank you, Taeyun. So just quickly, my overview of the career so far. So this is, I think, my fourth or fifth job. So I did my bachelor in law in Japan, and I did my master in international security or international human rights law in France. And then after that, I started my career. And at the beginning, I was working for human rights rather than humanitarian actions. And I did my so I worked in Taiwan and then in France. And actually, I applied for JPO when I was in France at the end of my career, the tenure. But then I failed. I was not even selected in the first screening, which is the document selection. And then I was like, okay, fine. And then I went to an NGO, humanitarian NGO, and I was working in Turkey for 1.5 years. And I was working for Syrian refugees in Turkey. And then after that, I got a position as an UNV through a program. So in Japan, we have a program organized by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, where several Japanese are selected to join the 5 weeks session, like a kind of like a lecture in Hiroshima. And then after that, we are sent to UNV program for 1 year. So with this program, I started working in UNHCR in Moldova, which is a small country next to Ukraine. So I was working for Ukrainian refugees, staying in Moldova for 1 year as a field officer, which is slightly different from protection officer that I am now. And then after that, yes, I got a JPO position with a second time, and I am now here for already. I have been working as a JPO for 1 year, as I said at the beginning. So that's a very, very brief overview of my career so far.
Thank you, Hide. What about you, Yifei? Could you briefly introduce us about your career journey before JPO?
Yes, of course. Yes. So very different from Hide. I did not come from the legal background, and I actually studied sociology in my undergrad, and also like in my master degree, I studied international educational development in New York. That's how I get to know about education emergencies in the refugee context. And then after graduation, it was during COVID. And then I actually started working with BRAC, which is an organization. And I got a internship in Uganda. And then later on, I have worked in UNESCO as an intern for a year in Jakarta and also in New Delhi. And after that, I joined UNHCR through a government-funded internship program from China. And then during that time, I was able to start my humanitarian career over there in Uganda. And then that's how I started my career with UNHCR. After that, I was able to get a position as a contractor in the Uganda operation, focusing on fundraising. And from there, during my individual contractor position, I was able to apply for the JPO, and then that's how I started the JPO program in UNHCR Bangladesh. So yes, that's how I finished the 2-year program there as a Chinese JPO. So a bit different from Hide. Hide's work is more focused on the legal protection, but then from my side, it's more focusing on the community-based protection, working with refugee communities directly. So that the skill set and also the academic background is quite different from the more like from the
I
legal
see.
protection part.
Well, thank you, Yifei and Hida. Then could you guys share a bit about your work in the HCR and in Cox's Bazar? Like, what is your main responsibility as JPO from Japan and China? I mean, could you share first, Yifei?
Sorry, could you repeat one more time? My connection is not so good.
Sure thing. So, what is your role and job in HCR and in Cox's Bazar? And what is your main responsibility as a Chinese JPO?
Sounds good. And from my side, as I mentioned, I was working in the community-based protection team, where I was heading the UNHCR helpline. So my work was very new to the humanitarian field in the field of complaint and feedback mechanism, which in UNHCR was part of the community-based protection. If some people are familiar with UNICEF, this line of work falls under the I think social behavioral change. So yes, I was leading a team of 12 for the helpline, so that the team was picking up the phone calls from the refugees and answering their inquiries. The team was able to pick up like about 12,000 to 20,000, depending on the needs. 20,000 calls per month, depending on the needs. And then like we're working with other units like Hide. We have met with other units like Hide from legal protection and other colleagues from different protections, and then we are able to refer the refugees' concerns to different units for any actions that need follow up. So that the work is quite new and quite different from the regular protection work, but more focusing on the complaint and feedback mechanism as part of the accountability to refugees.
To briefly summarize, you're trying to have the refugees be better connected to the resources that they are entitled to.
Yeah, basically, yes.
Great. And Hide, could you also explain about your job as a Japanese PO and what you basically do in Cox's Bazar?
Sure. Just as a background, because I believe there are some people who are interested in UNHCR but not so familiar with UNHCR yet. So me and Yifei are both in a protection section, I would say, in UNHCR. And then in protection section, there are a lot of sections. For example, I am from legal protection, Yifei is from community-based protection, and then other child protection, gender-based violence, registration, durable solutions. So these are all included in the protection section. And for example, what Yifei was doing is community-based protection. So Yifei was closer to the refugees themselves. So like what Yifei was doing is listening to refugees directly. No, I am in legal protection. So basically, of course, we are dealing with the law, and then we are more like, we are trying to be close to the refugees, of course, but then rather a little bit farther from refugees than community-based protection. What we are doing is more like, let's see the rights. What kind of rights, human rights, refugees have, and if these rights are violated, then we are going to support to solve this. So basically, this is very abstract. And then exactly what I'm doing is that in Cox's Bazar, we have 33 camps. It's like I always explain, like there are like 33 cities. It's a huge refugee camps, and it's divided into 33 camps. I am in charge of 6 camps with other colleagues. So in our team, we have 5 or 6 colleagues who are in charge of camps. I am in charge of 6 camps with 3 Bangladeshi colleagues, and basically these 3 Bangladeshi colleagues are the one who is always every day in the camps and then receiving refugees. When refugees come to UNHCR, they share a lot of concerns. For example, like their family member is killed, their family member is beaten up, their family member is kidnapped, their family member is missing, all these things. And obviously this is the violation of their human rights, right? Security situation or safety and security. So basically when we receive this information, and of course UNHCR cannot provide we cannot provide a lot of things, you know. Ultimately, what we are going to do is to connect the refugees with the government authorities who can actually support, you know, like maybe government authorities can search for missing refugees, or the government can try to solve or like mediate the conflict between refugees, for example, you know. So what we are trying to do is to connect the refugees with the government authorities. But then the reason why we are here is because refugees don't know what to do. You know, if the family members are abducted, killed, missing, they don't know what to do. And then the first thing they do is to come to UNHCR and then say, what should I do? Then we are here to guide them. Okay, in this case, you have to go there, you have to go there. And then also because we have, so how UNHCR work is that in all the world's operation, UNHCR has several NGO partners we call implementing partners, and these NGOs are also supporting our work. And in our section, we have legal, like lawyers organization. So if they want to, for example, if refugees want to file a legal complaint, then we're going to connect these refugees to our legal partners who can actually support filing the legal case or represent the refugees on a legal in a legal court, for example, because Rohingya refugees that we are working for, they cannot read, they don't know how to do, you know, like a basic legal things. And of course, for us as well, it's very difficult. Like all these legal proceedings are very complicated. So some legal professionals should support them. So we are connecting the refugees with the legal, lawyers who can support them with the legal proceedings. So basically, that's what we are doing. It's a little bit abstract, but this is exactly what we are doing.
No, that was a great explanation. I mean, so basically you're trying to help the refugees to be better represented in terms of legal, and by connecting them with the government and by connecting them with other lawyer association and so on. That was a good explanation. Thank you, Hide. And then we will move on to next question. That is, both of you have worked in many different countries, like such. Hide worked in Turkey, France, and Thailand as well. And Yifei worked in Jakarta, Uganda, list goes on. And when you guys make career decisions, what was the most important factor that you considered? Is it like a personal growth? It could be salary, it could be work-life balance. And yes, what was the most important factor that you consider whenever you have to make career decision? And yeah, Hide, could you go first?
Yes, thank you, Taeyun. So at the moment, so far, I think, so I really wanted to be in the field because first, as I slightly mentioned at the beginning, after my graduation, I was doing more the work more related to human rights. So human rights is more like how to improve the right itself, or like more like diplomacy, you know, like advocacy in the human rights institutions. And it was also fulfilling, and I do believe that it's important. But then when I was doing this job, what I was feeling is that it's very far from the actual people who are suffering from the violation of human rights. Because we are talking about human rights, but we are sitting in a nice conference room, having nice coffee and nice cookies and etc. No? And what I wanted to do is more into the deep field. So that's why I started being in a humanitarian, because I thought, and I still believe, that humanitarian is more, you know, like on the ground, you know, like we are in front of the refugees, regardless of what kind of job responsibilities we have, but then we are trying to do more like short-term solutions, which is not that easy. But then the ultimate objective that I believe is that humanitarian affairs is more like short-term or mid-term solutions, and human rights is more long-term, how to improve the human rights itself. So I think overall, I've always wanted to be in the really close to those who are actually suffering, and in that sense, I'm quite satisfied with where I am now, because I mean, still because of the language barrier and because of the cultural background and everything, I cannot be in front of refugees every single day. But then still, as an international staff, I really feel that I am staying in really close to where refugees live. And then I have opportunities to speak with refugees directly. Like I'm trying to do every week, but then it's quite difficult. But yeah, so I think that's the baseline that I'm trying to think about in the when I decide to choose the career. And then also, I mean, simply I want to go to another place. So I try to go to, like I try to diversify the region, Yeah, I think that's the basic. Over.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Ida. So basically, you want to be closer to the people affected and you want to get closer to the refugees and the recipients. Yeah. Yeah, I think that is exactly what you need as a humanitarian officer, I think. And what about you, Yifei? What is the most important factor that you consider whenever you have to make your decision from Uganda to Cox's Bazar, or like New York to, let's say, Jakarta? What is the most important factor that you consider?
Yeah, definitely. And then I think very similar to what interests Hide. And then, when we were studying different UN agencies at least in my experience, in school, like we were learning about different organizations and also their line of work. And then I was able to study a bit about different organizations' educational policy. And then later on, I gradually got interested in this line of work, and then very fortunately, I was able to get selected by the Ministry of Education to start my humanitarian career. And then in this line of work, I get to meet so many amazing colleagues. And then in Uganda, and also one of them is also in this session, Arata-san. Arata used to be the JPO, and also we get to know each other in Uganda. And then in my early career, I was able to receive a lot of insights from those people, from colleagues and then friends. And then they encouraged me to learn more about UNHCR, not only in field of fundraising. I started in the area of fundraising and also private sector partnership. And then when Bangladeshi opposition opened up for the Chinese JPO, and which I know that it was about working in the field, working with community directly, even though at that time I was very early on in my humanitarian career. I had very little experience to limited experience working with communities directly. I know that the position in Bangladesh was able to support me in working with different communities closely, understanding their concerns, which I think is the power of humanitarian. And then it's also the ideology that when you're offering humanitarian assistance to refugees, the impact you see is quite minimum, but I want to see that what we can actually make contributions to their lives through programs or through other activities, so that we're giving them some skills or for livelihood, not really just providing them with assistance. I think that's the reason why I chose to apply for the position, but also at that time, I just want to have a job also, so that it's a different factors adding up together. Even though what I have envisioned, it's a bit different than the reality, but still, I feel people in this field of work, it's not only for the monthly paycheck, but also like we all have a good heart that want to make contribution to the world or to people's life. Yeah.
Yeah,
And thank you
hopefully.
again, Arata-san, who is in the panel, which is quite amazing to see you. Yes. Sorry, not in the panel, but in this like meeting room. Yeah.
Yeah, in this as a participant. Yeah, I think you invited her, but anyway. I'll have one more question and we'll go to Q&A, and then we're gonna have a deeper look into the JPO program in China and Japan, and yeah, maybe Korea as well. And my last question for the part one is, looking back, is there any decision or experience that you would have done differently, or something that you wish you had known earlier in your career? For example, in my case, I think that maybe becoming an engineer might have been a better option for me instead of choosing political science or English literature for my undergrad. But I wonder what you guys think. So yeah, what about Yifei first? What is there something that you would have done differently? It could be job related, it could be education related.
Yes, I think if I were to say, I think I should have done differently is also to look abroad of what we can do. And then like unfortunately, like given the major funding cut in the field or like in the field of humanitarian and also development, it's a bit difficult to retain a job in the UN system, of course. And then like many colleagues are losing jobs at the moment. Many office got closed down, and then like just because that the funding has become a quite big issue. And then like if I would do something differently, I rather to have a bit more fundraising and also like budget management skills that are a bit more, how can I say it, transferable. Because that, like I heard something that just before I was leaving Bangladesh, and then like the office was also cutting people, and also like from many friends that I used to work with, and then like they're losing jobs because the office are getting closed up, and then like people are being separated, and I feel like like in this field, I feel like this is just my personal my personal takeaway, which I don't think it's applicable to everybody, but I will say that I will try to develop my skills as more generalist as possible than specialist, because that like with the limited funding, the job opportunities are getting less and less, and then many people who have like decades of experience are losing their job and they are not being successful in job application at the same time. So I would say for people who are interested in this field, try to develop as much skills as you can, and then like being a bit more generalist in this funding crisis, I would say will be more beneficial than people who are only specialized in something. And yeah, that's just my personal takeaway. Yeah.
Interesting. Many people want to be an specialist, but maybe, as you said, becoming a generalist might be better to survive right now. Yeah, what about you, Hide? Is there something that, I mean, you regret or you would have done differently if you had known it from the beginning of your career?
Yes, it's a very difficult question, to be honest. But for example, it's I was feeling like while listening to Ife, it was interesting because I was about to say the opposite thing, because for example, I did law in bachelor, and then because I was in Japan, so I was basically doing a Japanese law, and I was so bored because I was not interested at all in Japanese law, and I was not thinking of becoming a lawyer at all, you know. So at the end of my bachelor, I started studying about international law, and then I kind of started like, okay, this is fine, I can do it. And for master degrees, I did international human rights law, but still it was more like international relations. So I had to take quite broad topic about, for example, international economics, politics, philosophy, and law. So what if I could do once again, then I would focus more on law part, international law part, so that I can really confidently say I am a lawyer. Because now I cannot say I did law, but then I'm not confident enough to say openly that I am a lawyer. I don't know, again, I'm not a practicing lawyer. So that's one point. And again, I'm repeating the same thing, but then I started from human rights. But then I've always wanted to work for refugees. I've always wanted to work for refugees since my university days, but then I didn't do extensive research. So to be honest, I didn't know how to start my career, because humanitarian field is quite limited, and especially in Japan, I can see some Japanese friends in this meeting. So if they may have some different opinions, but then I see very few Japanese who want to be humanitarians. And at that time, when I was a university student, I really couldn't find anyone around me who can, with whom I can discuss how to be a UN staff, how to be a humanitarian. So I was really lost. And then I was like, I don't know what, but then let's go for international human rights law because it sounds nice. So if the current me, with all the knowledge that I have right now, can start all over once again, then I will straight go from humanitarian field, not bypassing human rights law, human rights field, because this is exactly what I wanted to do. But then at that time, I didn't know. So I started from human rights, and then I started realizing that this is not exactly what I wanted, and then I switched to humanitarian. So, I wouldn't say that this 3-4 years that I spent for human rights is a waste, because now I have the knowledge of, humanitarian human rights conventions and law, which I could sometimes use in my work, but then not necessarily every day. So yeah, again, it's not a complete waste, but then if I could do once again, then I wouldn't do it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Over.
Thank you for sharing, Hida. Well, before we proceed to part 2, if possible, I will get some questions from the participant, if there is any, maybe 1 or 2. If you have any question, please raise your hand or just speak it out. Is there any question right now?
The ample explanation. So actually, the first time to get to know like a number of the refugee camp in Bangladesh. So that's why I wonder which countries refugee come from and what political reasons makes them to flee from their own countries. So could you explain why?
Yeah. Could you explain just briefly about this issue?
Yes, sure. Thank you very much, Sam, for the question. So me, Taeyun, Yifei, and I are working in Cox's Bazar in Bangladesh. And Cox's Bazar is a border city with Myanmar. So we are working for Rohingya refugees who are persecuted or who are, kicked out of Myanmar because of their ethnicity. So Rohingya refugees or Rohingya people are Muslim, so they are worshipping the Islam religion, and they are in Myanmar, but then Myanmar government doesn't want to accept them, so they do not have nationality. Like if you are in Korea, you have Korean nationality. In Japan, I have a Japanese nationality. They are in Myanmar, but they do not have Myanmar nationality because the government doesn't want it. Right, so this is another layer. So these people who do not have nationalities, we call them stateless people. They do not have nationality, which means that there's no country who will protect them, which is a big problem, right? And then they are kicked out of Myanmar, and they went to Bangladesh to escape from the violence, and then Bangladesh kindly accepted them as a temporary measure. So that's why these Rohingya people, now almost 1.1 million people, is in Bangladesh staying as a refugee. So the Rohingya refugees that we are working for are very special among all the refugees that we have in the world, because they are refugees, and then they're stateless persons as well. It's rare because normally there are a lot of refugees, but then they normally have nationality. Right, for example, Ukrainian refugees, they they are going out of Ukraine, and they become refugees, but then they still have Ukrainian nationality. So when Ukraine finishes the war, then they can go back to Ukraine and then become a normal citizens, right? But then Rohingya refugees does not have nationality, which means there's no one who can protect them. So even though the conflict in Myanmar finishes, hopefully soon, no? Then they go back to Myanmar, but it does not necessarily mean that they will be protected by Myanmar. So it's a very complicated crisis. That's why this conflict has been ongoing since, I don't know, 1990s, we say. But then, of course, like it's I believe it's way longer. So yeah, that's just a brief explanation.
Thank you, Hide. And then let's talk about the JPO the Korea, China, Japanese JPO's differences then. So in terms of Korea, for example, when how JPO is ongoing is there is a UN. So first, the applicants submit their CVs, then UN organization they screening. And then the Korean government, MOFA, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, there is an interview. And then after the interview, some UN organizations such as WIP, they often have like this written exam. Then finally, there is UN interview. So first, just screening, paper screening, interview by the Korean government, exam. It depends on what UN organization it is. And lastly, UN interview. But I'm wondering how it is different from like by countries. For example, how does China's JPO work, and is it different from Korean JPO selection system? Yifei, could you share?
Sorry, I was muted and I did not unmute myself. And then like a bit different from Japanese and Korean system. And then like for the Chinese JPO program, it's very interesting. So unlike MOFA from Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Chinese JPO opportunities are announced by the Ministry of Education through the China Scholarship Council. I have seen some Chinese audience in this meeting room, so it's good for you to understand a bit. And then I'm not sure if the JPO program, it's the application for the JPO program for the next year is closed. But then basically you have to go to the China Scholarship Council to apply for it. And after that, it's a quite competitive selection process. You have to pass the resume, so background check. And after that, you're invited for the interview. Oh, sorry, you have a written exam. After the written exam, you have an interview. And after the interview, the Ministry of Education will submit, I think, a list of candidates to the hiring manager. And then we will go through interview, and then again with the hiring manager, and also some requires written exam, which I get to know for the other positions. So that it's a quite competitive process. And then the competition is pretty difficult, and then which really requires you to understand the organization, to have the previous experience of the work that you will be doing, but also more importantly to understand the line of work and also the mandate of UNHCR. Yeah.
I see. Then may I ask how many people got selected this year for last year? For example, last year, Korea selected 31 people for the JPOs.
Wow.
Is it different from China?
Yeah. I think it's about 7 or 8 last year for the JPO, but only for the UNHCR. It's not for the UN entirely. And also there are two way of selection. there are two ways. The first way is to select people directly from the ministry. So it's more like their opportunities to get to know the UN, and then like this one are only open to people, to the government officials who are already working in the ministry in China. But then the second one is open recruitment. So like this is how we join the UNHCR JPO programs. And then the number of positions is quite minimum. I think it was 7. In my year it started with 7, but then 3 position got cut. So like eventually became 3. So that this every year is different, and sometimes last year I don't think they have any JPO program. It was the year before, so that it's not really certain how many JPOs positions are released in a yearly basis. But then you just need to pay attention to the website, and also to the official account of the China Scholarship Council. And then they announce the positions quite frequently. But then definitely, if you have prior experience, for example, like when I was applying for the JPO programs, I was already working inside UNHCR, even though in a different field in fundraising. But then I was able to understand the protection principles, and then and also the protection guidelines, which really helped my application to be more successful. So yeah, that's my experience.
Thank you, Yifei, for sharing. What about you, Hida? How's Japanese JPO selection process going on? Is it different from China and Korea?
Yeah. So, so the Japanese JPO program is done by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Japan, and then when you apply, there are two paths. So, certain organizations are selected by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Japan. Certain organizations are selected through the respective UN agencies. For example, WFP is selected by WFP, and for example, UNHCR or IOM are selected by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So since I applied for UNHCR, after the application and the document screening, it's the Ministry of Foreign Affairs who does the screening and does the interview. And the exam, yes, there was not an exam, but there was a written essay evaluation. So after the first screening of documents, and when I passed the document screening, the ministry asked us to write a kind of essay, and it was evaluated, and then I think it was needed for the next interview process, and I did interview with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs people, and then in the panel there were several people who have the previous working experience in IOM or UNHCR who know the contents, no? And then they were also asking how much I know about the context that I am applying for example, because now I'm currently working in Cox's Bazar, but that was my 5th choice, and my first choice was Venezuela. So I wanted to work in Venezuela, and I was asked a question about South American migration and refugee crisis, which I have no idea about. And I was quite, puzzled by these questions, and I don't even know what I answered. But yeah, so there are quite technical questions asked. And then after that, once I pass this Ministry of Foreign Affairs phase, then there's an interview by the hiring agency or hiring office. So I did an interview with my current supervisor in Cox's Bazar. But what I heard, I'm not so sure, but then this interview with the UN agency is kind of like a, fact check. So it doesn't really, unless I do some horrible answers, then it will not affect the process. This is what I heard, but I'm not 100% sure. And the number of JPOs is decreasing for Japan because of the financial situations. for my batch, which is 2023, I think there were 55, around 55 JPOs. And for UNHCR, there are only 4. So this 55 includes all the UN agencies and including also UN Secretariat. And I heard 2024 was around 40, so it's quite a decrease. And 2025, I don't know. Yeah, that's it. Over.
Well, thank you, Hida. I mean, that is very different from Korea. For example, it's the other way around for Korea. We do actual interview with the UN agencies. And we do have interview with the Korean government, MOFA. It's just a fact check, as you said. Unless you cannot speak Korean at all, or unless you see something very awful, I was told that you will pass the exam. You will pass the interview with the Korean government. So it's a bit different like that. But moving on. In your experience, especially seeing the funding cut right now, how many JPOs really stay in the same organizations that they were assigned during their JPOs, even after the JPOs? And what do you think you should do as a JPO, during JPOs to further develop your career? Starting with Hida first.
So it's very difficult question because I really don't know, because now the situation is really peculiar. So this current funding situation, especially this US fund cut, is really hitting horribly all the humanitarian organizations. So UNHCR this year is 75 years anniversary, but then all the colleagues, including like very senior colleagues, say that the current year is the most difficult time of UNHCR within the 75 years. So previously, I could have said that, I don't know the percentage, but for example, some JPOs try to get the TA, temporary assignment contract, to stay until they can apply for the fixed term position, which is more stable. So I think previously it was slightly possible, but now it's really difficult, and I need to say it's quite impossible for JPO to be selected for a proper position, because even those who already have proper positions cannot secure their proper position after their tenure. And then a lot of people are cut, as Yifei just mentioned, because of the fund cut. So now it's a time where the situation is drastically changing in all the organizations. And previously, for example, if one organization is affected, then I could go to another agency. If UNHCR is horrible, then I could go to WFP or I could go to IOM. But then now the situation is hitting every single organization. So I cannot go to WFP, I cannot go to IOM, I cannot go to UNICEF, because all these organizations are cutting drastically their staff. So I still have 1 year to go, but to be honest, I don't know what to do. And of course, the plan B, plan C is that, forget about UN agencies and then apply for any humanitarian organizations that are willing to hire me, because I have to work. So of course, I will try all my best to secure my positions anywhere in the UN systems, but then I am quite, I hope the ministry people are not listening to this, but I'm quite pessimistic about it. And I have to be very honest, because it's not about my ability or my competence, but it's the situation is, as I said, the most horrible time of 75 years. So, and if the experienced colleagues cannot get the position, of course I cannot. So this is my very honest view. Yeah, over.
Thank you, Hida, for honest sharing. What about you, Yifei? You lately terminated your contract as a JPO at the Cox's Bazar. So what do you, how do other JPO colleagues from China usually develop their career after JPOs? And what do you think what someone should do during their JPOs to further develop their career?
Yes. I finished my contract. It's not terminated, by the way. I just finished them. I completed them.
Sorry, my bad.
So yes, And then yes, so like Hide, like what Hide said, I'm the one who has separated from the UN agency, UNHCR, and then just because that for my third year extension, and it was not successful as many operations have lost their funding. And then usually, for China, we can get a third year extension depending on the approval of the government and also the embassy. In my case, everything went smoothly, but then when HQ want to find a replacement for me for the third year, many of the office has mentioned that they don't have funding, and then they are in the phase of funding cut, so that they're not able to support the second half of the funding. So for audience who are not so familiar with the UN system, usually for the third year JPO, um, the um, the cost is shared by the hosting agency, so the hosting office, and also the government. So 50% comes from the government, and the other 50% comes from the office. And then, in my case, even though the government was quite positive with funding, it just did not work because the other office, they do not have the other 50% of the funding, so that it did not go through. And then because I have always worked in the hardship duty station, and then Arata-san will know very well. And then we come from the deep field, so I also decided to take a break from the UN humanitarian work, and also just to recharge and also focus on my personal health a bit. And then so it's definitely a personal choice, but also combined with the funding crisis. So that, I have decided to take a break from the humanitarian field. Maybe I will join the private sector and then, or other related field. But then right now I'm focusing on personal development. But then definitely previously many colleagues, they were able to be retained in the UN system. And that's actually quite I think I'm not sure about the specific statistics, but then I know the chance of getting retained or continue with the UN agency is quite high. But then just because of the funding crisis right now is a bit unfortunate, so that not many people are getting continued, or they're finishing their contract and wrapping up their GPO assignment. But I still feel like it's one of the amazing way to join the UN system, as the competition is not as high as just the open recruitment. And then previously, many JPO, many formal JPOs of China that I know, they are the one who are able to continue. And actually in Cox's Bazar office, one of our colleague is the first batch of the Chinese JPO. And then and also we have the second batch of the Chinese JPO also working there. So that, we have a number of people who are using their examples to prove that, as JPOs, you had a very good chance of being retained. But then just in terms of the current funding situation, right now, nobody's safe in the organization, so that you don't know what's going on. And then sometimes that, the office may just tell you on the last day of the month that your position is discontinued. Even though for JPO it's a bit safer because the funding is coming from the government, so that for us it's only by the contract. But then for fixed term, for temporary assignment, for contractor, you don't know what's going on, just because that maybe one day the office doesn't feel they don't have enough money for it. So yeah.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I think the situation right now and just 2 years ago, it's just completely different. So, and I will move on to the last question, and I will have a Q&A session. So we will be 10 minutes late on schedule. Will that be okay for both of you? Can I finish 10 minutes late? Just for Q&As mostly. Would that be okay, Yifei and Peter?
Yes, sure. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Yifei. So, the last question is, if you, is there like, looking back, is there something that you wish you had been supported from your government, such as China or Japan? Like it could be networking, or it could be education opportunity, or it could be other career development opportunities. There's something you wish you had been supported from the government. From Hida first, maybe.
Yes. So, yeah, maybe networking, because, for example, I am working in UNHCR, but then I don't know any other JPOs who are working in UNHCR, or like, like 1 year ago, like 1 year earlier, 2 years earlier, I don't know anyone. And then as far as I remember, unless I missed something, an email from the ministry, the ministry doesn't really arrange anything. So this would have been nicer. For example, as Yifei mentioned, our Cox's Bazar office, the head of office, who has been working in UNHCR for 27 years, she started as a JPO. And my supervisor, who has been working in UNHCR for 10 years, he also started as a JPO. I mean, both Japanese. So this kind of thing, and it's quite often the case that I find Japanese staffs who started as a JPO, but then it doesn't mean that I know other JPO staff from Japan who are currently working, right? And then if they could somehow support us, connect between each other, then I could have contacted this person and then ask just casual questions like, how is the situation in Congo? How is the situation in Syria? Or something like this. But then this is not happening so far. And I think it's really, the UN is really a matter of who knows what, like if you know this person, then you might be selected. And if you don't know, then you might not. Because it sounds really horrible, and then I don't like this either. But then if you think about it, if one position opens, 500 people applies, and then what happens, what HR, human resources, and the hiring manager does is they go through all 500 people, right? And then if you have 500 people, of course they will go for someone No, it's not because this person is especially good, but then because we don't have any information of all the other 490 people. Then if you have someone who already know that this person is trustworthy, then rather than going one by one thoroughly all the 500 applications, it's quite highly likely that this person who the hiring manager knows will be selected. So I mean, I'm not justifying, I'm not saying it's good, but then what I want to say is the connections are really important in the UN system. So
Definitely,
I
reference
wish,
matters.
I wish the ministry could have organized something like this. Yeah, over.
Yeah, I completely agree. Reference is so important when it comes to international development in Korea, especially as you said, if like 1,000 people apply, it's impossible to check all 999 people. So you rely heavily on the references. So networking is important, as you said, and knowing the right people. But what about you, Yifei? Is there something that you wish you have been supported from your government? That could be education, career insight, or networking, or other like job introductions. I don't know.
Yeah, I think from my side, it would be more beneficiary to our GPO learning is just to similar to Hide, like just to like introduce ourselves together and also like group people together, I would say, because that like it's not this field is quite new to Chinese officials. And then like like we did not really have many Chinese nationals in this field like long time back. It's more like like recently it's a new field and a new line of work for us. Like, you know, like when we were applying for the jobs, when I remember a few years ago when I was applying for jobs, my friend were also coming from KOICA or JICA. And then like for us, the Sitka is a very new organization. And then like we did not have much experience as a country, I would say. And then like, you know, like even though that it's very good that, you know, the government is focusing on this field and then sending Chinese nationals to different UN agencies and then gradually like sharing experience to other newcomers. And then I just feel like, you know, this one can be enhanced a bit more so that we can create our own community. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Yifei, for sharing. So that's the end of all the questions. We are 5 minutes late, but I will try to take some question if there is any from the participants. Is there any question that you want to pose to the mentors? Then please raise your hand or just write on a chat, or yeah, let me know.